I offer a content warning on the message this morning that it details my personal experiences with abortion, pregnancy loss, and miscarriage. So please feel free to leave the sanctuary at any time, for any reason, with my blessing. You may also watch a recording of this service at a later date, and I personally will remain in the sanctuary immediately following the Song of Peace to speak with anyone who would like to discuss the service topic further. If you need to leave the sanctuary, I'd like you to have the highlights of the message. So here they are. The real stakes of the election are that it will become easier for the government to continue taking away rights from us that we have fought for decades and centuries to win, such as abortion access, affirmative action considerations, and other protections from discrimination based on our social identities. The explicit goal of the Trump policy agenda is to uniformly restrict abortion access. This is a devastating public health policy that does not align with our values as Unitarian Universalists because it targets poor and Black women and people who can get pregnant for exclusion from the beloved community. White women are the single largest voting bloc in the United States, and rights for all people have increased when their voting patterns have aligned with the interests of Black women. All people are needed to help us all get free. And with that, the message. I was still a teenager the first time I was asked to support a friend through an abortion. Having completed both the senior high version of the Our Whole Lives program, the life-saving sex education curriculum our UUA first co-authored with the United Church of Christ in 1999, and its predecessor curriculum about your sexuality, which was first field tested in 1969, I knew what to do in theory. Honestly, the topic of abortion wasn't even that scary to me. My childhood and early adolescence had been formed by the origination of the terms pro-life and pro-choice in the 1990s, and I had chosen a firmly pro-choice attitude. What scared me is that I never thought we'd have to make decisions about abortion quite so soon. And I honestly never thought that my role as a man would matter at all. The decision to keep a pregnancy or to terminate one through abortion is a decision we make with the community available to us at the time. Not everyone has other people they can reliably consult. And for those who do, I have learned that sometimes we get consulted on issues others believe we can help with, even if we don't see that strength or that ability to discern in ourselves. Before I was 25, that same friend, I had to support them through another abortion, and together we celebrated 2 wanted pregnancies and grieved 2 miscarriages. The birth and delivery department at hospitals still remains a place of extremely mixed emotion for me. It pains me even more to imagine all of this playing out against the backdrop of today's America, where both pregnancy care and abortion access are even more limited. Because requiring people to retain unwanted pregnancies or to deliver in cases where fetal demise is imminent can inflict cruel emotional scars that do not fade with time, even as they imperil the life of the person carrying the pregnancy. The national abortion policies that former President Trump champions, as stated in Project 2025, emphasize protecting pro-life healthcare providers and organizations from being compelled to perform or support abortions. They advocate for shielding these entities from discrimination and defunding organizations that provide or promote abortion services, such as Planned Parenthood. It would even say that we should block the participation of those organizations in Medicaid. These policies also propose opt-in abortion training in medical education, providing regulatory audits to safeguard against violations of healthcare providers not to learn necessary healthcare. There would be no explicit exceptions for rape or incest, underscoring that this is a uniformly restrictive approach to abortion access. And while his campaign has sought to distance itself from the Heritage Foundation, which crafted Project 2025, the editors, Paul Dans and Stephen Groves, both served in the Trump administration. Moreover, the former president has run 3 times on limiting abortion access. We can have some degree of certainty that he will institute these policies. This is a clear rupture with our UU values. Our values to hold the most vulnerable people with love and compassion at the center of community care. This is not a world that we can promote. In my early 20s, 2 more friends asked for abortion support, and one actually asked me to attend the procedure with them and monitor their recovery. I remember that experience with eerie clarity, and as I was writing this up, I was transported back to those moments. The friend lived in another state, and I had a car that couldn't quite make the trip, so I got as far as the car could go and parked it at a friend's house. It was an extremely long bus ride, punctuated by a very short car ride to the clinic. When you're not the boyfriend and you're a different gender than the person carrying the pregnancy, sometimes even healthcare providers don't know what to make of you. There was a frank conversation about the procedure and what it would entail, as well as very, very detailed aftercare instructions. And then I was escorted to the waiting room and my friend to the procedure room. I listened to an entire Kanye West album while waiting. It was a different time. Kanye was not Ye. And at some point, I drove to the drugstore to pick up a thermometer because the aftercare instructions said to monitor for fever. Waiting felt like forever. I had no idea what the scope of the procedure would take, how long it would take. I knew that anything could happen. And then just as suddenly, it was over. It was just over. My friend was escorted out to the waiting room, and I drove that person to the hotel that we were staying for the weekend. They recovered well. We ordered food in, and on Monday or Tuesday, I returned home, and we never spoke about it again. I was really scared. We were both so scared, and I think we were really strong. Each of us needed to be brave for the other. It took a lot to be together that weekend. It's taken a lot to remain friends, even now. And in today's America, more than bravery and a loving confidant is required to access abortion in nearly half of the country. Meaningful policy change that enshrines compassionate health care is what's needed. It's not enough to just transport people out from abortion-restrictive states to abortion sanctuaries. This country needs to be a place that provides compassionate and necessary health care for all who are seeking it. Because a community is not beloved that requires people to carry pregnancies they do not want. A community lacks compassion when it privileges the rights of pregnancy tissue and fetuses over the life of a person carrying the pregnancy. And a community is without moral guidance, totally unmoored from its moral compass when it demands that survivors of rape and incest carry pregnancies that will always bring a reminder of this most intimate violation of consent, all while failing to hold those who transgressed against them accountable in the first place. We will not live in an America that punishes people who get pregnant, must be our cry. We will not live in an America that punishes people who get pregnant. We must proclaim. We will not live in an America that punishes people who get pregnant, is the soundbite of our values for this time. In an article published in the New York Times Magazine just yesterday, Nicole Hannah-Jones, author of the 1619 Project and Knight Chair of Race and Journalism at Howard University, helps us understand how we got here in the first place. Beneficially and sometimes problematically, white women since the 19th century have played an outsized role in American politics. And with 59 million voters, Hannah-Jones tells us, white women constitute the nation's largest voting bloc, and also its most divided. About 53% of white female voters identify as or lean Republican, compared with 43% who identify as or lean Democrat, according to the Pew Research Center. The report, which was published in April of this year, Changing Partisan Coalitions in a Politically Divided Nation, is available on the Pew website. Now, white women in this room or here on Zoom, I want you to hear the power that I'm talking about right now, not just the critique of power. Elections, constitutional amendments, and policies have been won and lost on the organizing prowess of white women. That is incredible power. That is a lot of power. And as the Spider-Man comics remind us, with great power comes great responsibility. I know that everyone in this room thinks hard about the power that they have and that they use it responsibly. And you can also enter spaces that I can't enter, that other people of color, that other women and femmes of color cannot enter. Your work is not done just by understanding the limits of your own power. There are conversations you have to have with other people who share your identities, because there are some of us who cannot, some of us who are never invited, some of us who are never even considered. Now, returning to what Nicole Hannah-Jones says, she offers that the two greatest movements for women's rights in this nation, the suffragist movement and the women's liberation movement, were each rooted in black freedom struggles. Each historical example demonstrates the transformative potential when white women act in solidarity, not with white men, as they so often do, but with black women. And so let's trace this. The first gathering for women's rights in this nation was in 1837 with the first anti-slavery convention of American women. It was an interracial gathering of over 200 women from all over the continent at that time. But by 1848, at the Seneca Falls Convention, considered one of the first gatherings specifically for feminism in the United States, there were no black women. As a matter of fact, the only black person invited to the event was Frederick Douglass. Suffragists from that point on then intentionally excluded black women under a policy called expediency, believing that if they linked their struggles to black women, again, that white politicians wouldn't take them seriously. And they promised that once white women got the vote, they would also fight for black women to get the vote. Black women are not and have never been Boo Boo the Fool, and were not fooled by this, but had no other options, and then spent the better part of the next half century fighting for their own suffrage until they passed the 1965 Voting Rights Act. At the same time, they were able to work for inclusion in the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which made discrimination on the basis of sex illegal. Interestingly enough, discrimination on the basis of sex was only snuck into that bill at the very last moment, with politicians calculating that would cause it to tank. And so we inadvertently outlawed discrimination on the basis of sex through the work of black women just because it got snuck in at the very last moment. That, in turn, led to the creation of the National Organization for Women, led by Pauli Murray and other black women, as well as white female activists. That organization fought for birth control, abortion access, and the right for women to own homes in their own names and have their own bank accounts and credit cards. At the same time as black women won these rights for all women, white women failed to support the candidacy of Shirley Chisholm, a black woman and the first woman to run for president in one of the major two parties. And so here's the thing. Here's the thing, as we learned from a 2019 study authored by Jane Jun and Natalie Musoka, who found that white women's race, more than their religious beliefs, income, or education, predicted their support for Republican candidates. Outside party affiliation, race specifically, identifying as white in this case, is the only variable that is consistently significant across the 2008, 2012, and 2016 elections. The unwillingness or inability of white women to align political interests with the needs of black women led to Republicans getting elected and passing policies that are not in line with our values as Unitarian Universalists. Elections, policies are won and lost over the organizing power of white women. That is incredible power. And when white women, indeed when all people align with the liberatory framework of black women, things improve for all of us. We all win when we align our struggles with the frameworks that black women fight for. They have always been fighting for all of us. And with destructive policies around abortion access and pregnancy care that will disproportionately impact black women and poor people with uteruses, policies that are already ending the lives of pregnant people irrespective of race or class, our values demand that we make a choice that keeps love and compassion for those most directly impacted by these policies at the center of all that we do. Because when we follow the leadership of black women, we all do better. As I just detailed, nearly 200 years of American political history shows that when we follow the leadership of black women, there are better outcomes for everyone. We know this even here on our beloved island, because the Hawaiian monarchy in 1810 explicitly outlawed slavery and discrimination on the basis of race in 1810. The Constitution of the Kingdom of Hawaii did something that our U.S. Constitution has still failed to do after all these years. It declared that there are no exceptions to freedom, that there are no limits on who can lead, and no one is outside of the circle of concern. No one is left outside of the beloved community. The monarchs understood that it was important to follow the leadership of black people. When we get the outcomes we want, we celebrate the leadership of black women. When our hearts are in the holiest of places, we follow the leadership of black women. And as for me, my personal experience with abortion and pregnancy care has helped me understand the utter necessity of unfettered access to qualified health providers and to necessary healthcare services. No one should have to carry an unwanted pregnancy. We want every child born to be a loved child. No one should be forced to carry a wanted pregnancy that endangers the life of the pregnant person or that of the fetus. We know that this is a compassionate decision, and that making compassionate decisions is what our UU values. Our values as a democratically engaged community ask of each and every one of us in this sanctuary and those listening in the years and the days and the weeks to come. And well, y'all, that brings us to the real stakes for Tuesday. How many of y'all have already voted? Wonderful. I sent in my ballot last week as well. For those of you who haven't, polls are open till 7. We'll talk about that more. The real stakes of the election are, again, that it will become easier for the government to continue taking our rights away. Rights that we have fought for decades, for centuries, that Black women have fought for decades, for centuries, to win. For us, for everyone's outcome to be better, specifically around abortion access, affirmative action, and other protections like discrimination on the basis of sex. They're coming for all of them. That's the policy agenda. The explicit goal of the policy agenda of the Trump campaign is one that does not align with our values as Unitarian Universalists because it targets poor and Black women and all people who can get pregnant for exclusion from the beloved community because they won't be able to make healthcare decisions on their own. And white women, you are the single largest voting bloc in all of the United States. Rights for all people in the United States have increased when your voting power, when your voting patterns align with what Black women have sought out for all of us. Use that power aggressively, wisely, and compassionately. It is time for all of us to get behind the leadership of Black women. It is time for us to get behind the leadership of people who have never failed to fight for all of us. It is time for us to get behind leadership that affirms, promotes, and proclaims our values as Unitarian Universalists on a national and international level. And so that's the real stakes, y'all. The real stakes for Tuesday, the real stakes for this election and everyone after it is who gets to live to see how beautiful the beloved community can be. And when love and compassion are at the center of all we do, we know all are welcome. No one needs to die waiting to see the beauty we make together. And that's the real stakes. Amen. Ashe. And please go vote.